This episode is about a woman who firmly cut off her mother-in-law, who was upset that she did not put the property given by her biological father under joint ownership with her husband. When the mother-in-law insisted on an apology, she retorted with biting words. Let's delve into this together. Please subscribe and like our channel.
Hello? Can you hear me out? I can't believe there are people like this in the world. Irrespective of the fact that they're my in-laws. I'm talking about them as human beings. I've been married for almost 10 years. And we have a son who's going to elementary school next year. It seems that my in-laws still have no intention of admitting their mistakes. They say they would accept an apology from me now. But I have no intention of accepting an apology from them. Is this a difference in perspective? Perhaps. Let me calm down and write down what happened. My husband got a job right after he completed his military service, and has been working at the same place ever since. I have been working continuously without a break since before we got married. My husband didn't go back to school after his military service, because he was in a difficult situation. He said there was no need to go to college because he got a good job. He moved out a year after he started working. I met him when he was living alone. Even when he was living independently, his mother demanded money from him. He gave her money for about 3 years. But her demands became increasingly outrageous. He cut off the money he was giving her 3 years after he moved out, because he couldn't handle it anymore. He suffered from his mother and sister-in-law's harsh words for a while. And his relationship with his family deteriorated since then. His mother didn't seem to care about her children. Even when mealtime came around, she wouldn't prepare food if she didn't feel like it. I couldn't understand this. My mother couldn't imagine not preparing meals for her children at mealtime. I have a child too, so I think I understand. I think it's terrible for a mother to withhold meals from her children depending on her mood. I think it's wrong, not just as a mother, but as a human being. The first time I visited my in-laws, my mother-in-law looked at me with a cold gaze. I felt something chilly, and she turned out to be a really cold-hearted person. I've never heard her say a kind word to me. A few years ago, my parents wanted to sort out some of their assets. My older brother had been in a few accidents, and seemed to have been telling my parents that he was having a hard time. My parents didn't tell me about this, but they couldn't stand it anymore and told me. They told me to take the land they owned in the countryside as a gift. I asked if we could afford to pay the taxes, and after looking into it, it turned out the taxes were less than the cash we had on hand. So I accepted the land that was in my father's name as a gift. Every time I visited my in-laws, I heard that my sister-in-law's husband brought a house to their marriage. I knew his parents were quite well off. So my sister-in-law got a house from her husband's parents. But I don't understand why she'd brag about that to me. I didn't expect it. But she was saying that her family gave her a house. So why didn't mine? Isn't it normal for a mother-in-law to apologize to her daughter-in-law for not being able to provide a house, while telling her that her son-in-law brought a house? Or try to hide the fact that her daughter's in-laws gave them a house? It seems my mother-in-law firmly believes that the spouse's family should provide something, regardless of gender. Once, my sister-in-law was bragging about her family so much that I said, it would have been nice if I'd married a rich man's son too. My mother-in-law turned pale, and asked what I had done to make such a comment. When I asked what I hadn't done, she brought up that my sister-in-law's husband brought a house into the marriage. So, I asked my mother-in-law if she had provided a house for her son when he married. She only glared at me in response. I then told her that my father recently gifted me some real estate. She reacted dismissively, asking how much could a rural property possibly be worth. So I told her the current market value of the land. I said that it was worth enough to buy 2 houses, like the ones my sister-in-law's family had, and still have money left over. Surprised, she asked me what I was planning to do with the land. I told her that according to my father, the area was improving and the land value would continue to rise, so I planned to keep it. My mother-in-law and sister-in-law caused a fuss, excitedly making plans with my property. They suggested selling the land to buy commercial property or an apartment. I couldn't understand why they were making a fuss over my property. I told them firmly that I had no intention of selling the land, and they should stop discussing it. A few days later, I visited my in-laws, and my mother-in-law and sister-in-law were causing another fuss. They asked why I hadn't put the land under joint ownership with my husband. I was flabbergasted at this absurdity. When I asked why I should put my father's gift under joint ownership, my mother-in-law said that couples should be fair after marriage. I didn't think her words were worth responding to, so I kept my mouth shut. My husband stepped in and expressed his anger towards his mother. He asked her how she thought my family would react if they heard her saying such things. She replied that she didn't care if they insulted her, and asked if she wasn't allowed to speak her mind. I was astonished, wondering if this was how a person should behave. My sister-in-law suggested that I sell the land to buy an apartment in her neighborhood. She said that if I sold the rural land and took out a small loan, I could afford an apartment in her area. I laughed and told her that, even after paying taxes for selling the land and buying the apartment, I would still have enough money left over to buy 2 apartments like hers. She asked why I wasn't doing it then. I told her that the taxes are not insignificant and questioned why I would sell land that could double or triple in value in a few years, pay taxes for selling it, and buying an apartment. My husband told his mother and sister to stop making comments about my property. He warned them that if they continued, it would make things uncomfortable between our families. I asked my mother-in-law if my sister-in-law had put the house she received from her in-laws under joint ownership with her husband. My mother-in-law just kept her mouth shut. I said that since my sister-in-law is part of the family after marriage, how could she not have joint ownership of the house? I asked my sister-in-law, "Didn't you ever suggest having joint ownership?" She said that it was an absurd suggestion. After my mother-in-law had asked me why I hadn't put the land under joint ownership with my husband, I asked her if she had asked my sister-in-law the same question. I told her plainly that I found their meddling in my property distasteful, and that I wouldn't be visiting them anymore. I reminded her that even family can become enemies over money. Considering her and my sister-in-law's interest in my property, I asked her why I would put myself in a position to be harmed by them. She just asked if she couldn't even say such a thing. I told her that no normal person could say such a thing. My husband told his mother that she was a strange person. He reminded her that he had given her a lot of money over the years since he started working, and asked her if she had ever visited my studio apartment where I lived alone. He then said, "We won't be coming here anymore. Don't look for us." For a few days after that, my mother-in-law and sister-in-law kept calling my husband, trying to explain that that wasn't what they meant. My husband was furious with them and told them to stop talking nonsense. Since then, we've cut off contact with his family for years. My parents are aware of this situation. It's been over 3 years since this incident happened. A few days ago, I got a call from my mother-in-law. I was curious about what she wanted, so I answered the phone. She said, "After living without acknowledging your in-laws, do you now understand your parents' feelings?" I was at a loss for words. Not because I had nothing to say, but because I was speechless. She took my silence as an admission of guilt and went on to say, "If you just admit you were wrong, all of this could have been avoided. Your stubbornness is truly remarkable. I told her. You were the one who was wrong. I might consider forgiving you if you come to me. Kneel and beg for several days. She fell silent. I added, that's just a thought. Don't get the wrong idea that I will forgive you just because I said that. And then I hung up the phone. In the evening, my husband told me that he received a call from my sister-in-law. She said that I had been very rude to their mother. My husband defended me, saying that I was not the kind of person who would do such a thing. He told her that I had done enough, and that it was now her turn to deal with their parents. He then hung up. I can't forget the expression on my mother-in-law's face, who had shown her dislike for me from the beginning. I don't understand why she told me that something good would happen from this, and asking me to admit that I was wrong. A few days ago, my mother-in-law called and confirmed something for me. It felt like she was giving me permission to cut ties with them. In a roundabout way. I'm going to live believing that.
What kind of madness is it for a daughter-in-law to have joint ownership of the property inherited from her own parents? And what's this idea that when a daughter marries, the son-in-law should provide a house, and when a son marries, the daughter-in-law should provide one? You did right by cutting ties. Even if they're family, if someone casually utters such absurdities, it's best to avoid them for the sake of peace in your own home.